Widely regarded as one of the hardest games ever created, Battletoads is often seen as an iconic entry in the NES's vast third-party library. Praise has been given to its beautiful presentation, impressive controls, and varied level design, while almost universally being criticized over its difficulty. Battletoads is one of those games that when you say the term NES hard, this is what people are talking about. It is a no-holds-barred romp through Crazy Town with stops in Bonkersville and Cuckoo Land. After the success of the first game on the NES, Battletoads went on to enjoy a surprisingly long and well-regarded life as a multimedia franchise, beyond the original game on the NES, which received ports to the Genesis, Game Gear, Game Boy, and even the Amiga CD. All of the ports had a severely toned-down difficulty, retooling some levels and outright removing others. Battletoads went on to have a number of sequels created, including a crossover with Double Dragon, aptly named Battletoads Double Dragon, as well as a remake for the GBA which was eventually cancelled, and a pilot for their very own animated series. Battletoads as a franchise has such an impressive staying power that they even made a cameo appearance in the PC Xbox version of Shovel Knight, and they even have a new game in development slated for release in 2019. It's fair to say that the Battletoads games are well loved and deserving of a lot of praise for something that came out as an attempt to cash in on an already popular franchise. Which is unfortunate because Battletoads is actually terrible. Battletoads came about at a time when many people were trying to capture that same lightning in a bottle that the Ninja Turtles captured in the late 80s and early 90s. Featuring 3 anthropomorphic amphibians named after skin conditions, Battletoads aimed to be edgy and extreme in a way that only a video game from 1991 could possibly be. From the early days of Rare, a developer who I personally have gone on many a tear lauding their great accomplishments with Nintendo, Battletoads is a side-scrolling beat-em-up, where you and your brothers? Friends? Guys you met in a dark alley? Whatever, your relation is not important. As one of the two Toads, Rash or Zitz, or both as the game supports multiplayer, we'll be coming back to that in a little bit, you are pitted against the forces of the Dark Queen who captured Pimple and his girlfriend, Princess Angelica. Despite the plot of this game reading like the script for an episode of Muppet Babies accidentally got mixed in with the script for a dermatologist commercial, it does have quite a bit of good going for it. So, before tearing this game a new one, let's look at what Battletoads gets right. For one thing, the presentation is fantastic. Battletoads was originally released in June of 1991, well into the life of the NES, and shortly before the North American release of the SNES. At this point, developers had really figured out how to juice every last precious pixel out of the NES hardware, and this game is no exception. The game itself starts out pretty optimistically. We're treated to a short cutscene and an absolutely excellent music track playing over the title screen. The major standout of this game is the music, but Rare always delivers on that front. Even the pause screen has a sick beat. Perhaps the most memorable thing about this game, and the only thing saving it from being relegated to the piles upon piles of forgotten IPs, is just how goofy it is. When pounding through the Dark Queen's dark forces, consecutive hits reward you with either a fist or foot growing exponentially and blasting enemies off the screen. You'll also periodically grow ram's horns or transform into a wrecking ball. It's very silly, and you can tell that the game doesn't take itself too seriously. Their acerbic wit is something that always brings me back to Rare, and it's always to their benefit. When you first start the game, you'll be lulled into a false sense of security by a pretty by-the-numbers beat-em-up affair. I already mentioned the music, which is top-notch throughout, but a few fun gameplay features show their heads here, such as the ability to pick up and carry weapons, ride on dragons, and a pretty sweet first level boss that completely flips the perspective of the game. The next stage is vertical, and will have you rappelling down a chasm to your next destination. You'll have to watch out for large angry birds that will snip your wires, electrical gates, mutant Venus flytraps, and a giant toad-killing robot. The stage ends unceremoniously, and you move on to stage 3. Up to this point, this is a pretty standard fare for an NES game, and no major atrocities occur. If the entire game were like stage 1 and 2, I would be singing the praises of Battletoads. The first major obstacle you're going to encounter is the Turbo Tunnel, a stage that I have still not beaten without the use of save states. In fact, stage 3 starts out much the same way. Some light platforming, punching bad guys, and a new enemy that literally steals your health from your health bar. About halfway through the stage, you meet the true horror of this stage: speeder bikes. To the game's credit, things start at a slow pace with obstacles telegraphing their presence well in advance. Things slowly heat up with the addition of small jumps, different patterns, all while the speed gradually ramps up. Eventually it gets to a point where you are jumping over literal chasms. Blocks are whizzing by you at light speed, and enemies creep up from behind you to throw more blocks in your path. And sometimes the game just does things to you that are outright unfair. I sure hope you stocked up on lives, because anything you touch will instantly kill you. To its credit, you can get more lives than what are shown on screen. I'm not actually sure what the upper limit is, but at least it's not 5, because that would be awful. The game is gracious enough to grant you checkpoints, but get a game over and it's back to the beginning of the stage. And once you eat through your 3 continues, it's game over and all the way back to stage 1. And this is the 3rd level! Eventually, through sheer power of will, you can get through this stage. Lucky for you, it takes you from a rolling boil to a literal cooldown as you get another quick and easy platforming stage themed around ice. Now here's where the real problem with this game comes in. The pacing is just all over the damn place. The majority of the subsequent stages follow the same premise: be quick or be dead. After the relative ease of stage 4, you're thrown into the next pseudo-speeder bike stage with Surf City. Though not as hard as the Turbo Tunnel, it's still pretty challenging and follows a similar formula. Dodge enemies and obstacles on the way to the end of the stage, hitting various checkpoints along the way. Now here's what I'm talking about when I say the pacing is all out of whack. Surf City is another level built around the same concept as Turbo Tunnel, except this time you're on a surfboard. Level 8 is the last traditional platforming stage before the final stage, but every other stage in between is a race to not get murdered. So far, I've mostly just talked about what makes the game difficult, not necessarily bad. Although just so we're clear, it is bad. Not because it's hard, but because of how it's hard. A game can be difficult and well designed. I love hard games. Cuphead is a great example of a hard, well-designed game. Super Meat Boy is the quintessential example of challenging but rewarding and satisfying. I recently played through the NES Mega Man games, and they are crazy hard. The difference between those and Battletoads is that Mega Man is well designed. Battletoads is not. Well, maybe not Mega Man 1. Okay, let's pick things up. I could do a play-by-play of each of the next stages, but I don't want this video to end up being too long, so I'll just provide the highlights. Stage 6, the Snake Pit, throws a new wrench in the works. Giant snakes will fly out of holes in the walls, and you have to cling onto them for dear life until you get to the next room. It's kind of like Roy's Castle and Larry's Castle in Super Mario World. The stakes are very similar, as falling off will result in either instant death or getting set way far back. The problem with this stage is that it's just way too long. If it were about half the length, it wouldn't be quite so frustrating. Stage 7, Volkmare's Inferno, is the next major obstacle. It's basically Turbo Tunnel The Revenge, except this time you're on a jet. It's exactly as horrible as it was the first time around. The main obstacle you'll face here is gates that have pixel-perfect passages. Stage 8 is another vertical platformer, except instead of going down, you're going up. It's honestly not a horrible level, and the last level where you aren't going to be racing for your life until the final level. It's an ongoing theme in this game. Stage 9 is a sewer level. This time your main foe is a series of giant gears that chase you through the pipes, and you have to figure out where's the safe place to stop and where's the place you will get turned into toad soup. It has some swimming and traditional no-pressure platforming sprinkled in, so that saves this from being a true horror show, but there's very little breathing room. Stage 10, Rat Race, is basically the calculator game Fall Down, except instead of being a ball, you're a toad, and instead of being a fun distraction from math homework, it's another agonizing level of Battletoads. You may have noticed that I harped on the race to not die points an awful lot, and honestly, this is another of the biggest flaws in this game. Most of the stages are built around quick reflexes and pattern memorization, rather than honing your skills and reacting to obstacles. Again, I go back to the example of Mega Man. These games are built for speedrunning. There is a specific path that, when optimized, you can breeze through most of these games in less than an hour. The trick to this is that it takes a long time to hone that craft, build up your skills, recognize the patterns, and know when to do a specific input. The games are meticulously routed around precision and skill, whereas Mega Man is designed to be a game accessible to anyone, but I can assure you it will take casual players to task. Battletoads expects you to know every inch of the game right out of the gate. A game shouldn't expect you to be an expert from the word go. That is bad design. Okay, we're nearly done with Battletoads, so let's get back into it. Here's the big boy, the stage that basically makes this game unbeatable. In fact, if you're playing this game in 2-player mode, it literally can't be beaten. There's a glitch in the NES version where the second vehicle won't move, and player 2 will just stand still and die. This was fixed in all other versions, including the Rare Replay version, but the stage still beats you over the head with difficulty. If you somehow manage to brute force your way through the rest of this game, which believe me, it is possible. I mean, people speedrun this game. This is probably going to be your Everest. It was for me. I could not get past this stage, even with save states. Hi, Future Nathan here, editing the video. So, for the sake of getting the footage that I needed, I tried to play this level legitimately, but I couldn't do it without blatantly cheating. So I ended up having to slow the game down to about 50% speed, and I was able to finish the level and get on to level 12. You know, just for full disclosure. Anyway, back to the video. Level 11 is Klingerwinger. It makes Turbo Tunnel look like preschool. You are once again being pursued by a force that will instantly kill you if it touches you. That alone is nothing unusual for this game, but this stage's mechanic is the Klingerwinger itself. You'll find yourself on a track that takes many twists and turns and tasks you with navigating it with, you guessed it, twitch reflexes. You're expected to press the D-pad in the direction the track faces immediately as you turn. The swirling orb that pursues you is faster on a straight line, but hammering the D-pad in the correct direction as you make the turn gives you a slight boost. It is a frame-perfect input, and no mere mortal is equipped for this kind of agony. It's a reasonably short stage, but it still asks a lot of the player. And honestly, it's a shame that I've never finished this stage, because level 12 has some really cool mechanics. If more of the game were like level 12, I'd have more kind things to say about Battletoads. The tower is the final stage before you face off against the Dark Queen, who awaits you at the top. It's another vertical platform, but the gimmick this time is that the tower sits on an axis, and it rotates as you move left and right. It's kind of the next step up from the screen wrap that you see in games like Balloon Fight or Pac-Man, and honestly, it is a really cool mechanic. Battletoads' difficulty often belies its fun gameplay mechanics, which is only to the game's detriment. As you scale the tower, you'll encounter the typical mobs of enemies, as well as some angry clouds that try to blow you off the tower to your death. It's not a difficult climb, but it's definitely not without its own set of challenges. Eventually, you will get to the top and face the Dark Queen herself. And they must have used up all the game's memory at this point, because she only seems to have 3 frames of animation. And she's not terribly challenging either, which is shocking, and just sort of Tasmanian devils at you until you bop her. Congratulations, you won and are rewarded with a pretty poor excuse for a cutscene of Pimple and his girlfriend being rescued and the Dark Queen flying off. Until next time! So, that's Battletoads. I hate this game. It's frankly impressive that it has enjoyed such a storied legacy, considering just how bad this game is. Battletoads' legacy is perhaps best owed to its insane difficulty. Now to reiterate, I don't think the game is bad because it's hard. What makes it bad is the way in which it is hard. Many of the stages are glorified QTEs and auto-scrolling levels with the threat of instant death constantly nipping at your heels. Now that's the thing about Battletoads. Underneath the punishing difficulty, there lies a game with some really fun ideas. Each stage offers a new gimmick that the player has to quickly figure out before they get shredded. The Mega Man series is perhaps the best comparative example of this. Each stage has its own enemies, its own mechanics, and puzzles that you have to figure out. In fact, depending on which order you do the stages, you may find yourself able to solve puzzles that you wouldn't otherwise be able to. Now, most of them just reward you with extra lives or E-tanks or the like, but it's still a cool way to reward exploration. And these are definitely not easy games. I only recently played through the first 6 NES games for the first time, and I had a great time, despite dying perhaps hundreds of times. Where Mega Man rewards you for doing difficult things, Battletoads seems to revel in your pain. It chews you up, spits you out, burns the remains, and pees on the ashes. Honestly, it's a fun game when it's not delivering unrelenting psychological trauma. The platforming stages are enjoyable, the color palette is surprisingly vibrant for an NES game, and the goofy animations give it its own unique flair, setting it apart from the other TMNT clones. It has the skeleton of a fun classic game, but the meat and organs are just rotten zombie goop. I don't really know where this metaphor is going. At any rate, it seems the developers learned a few lessons from this game. There are a number of sequels, and a 2019 reboot, which I'm definitely interested to see, and ports on various systems. The thing is, most of these other games, ports included, tone the difficulty way down to make it actually playable. If you're interested, some of those are worth checking out, Battletoads and Double Dragon being a personal favorite. But the original NES game should be left in the trash where it belongs. Well, that is all the time that we have for this video. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and share it with a friend if you think this is something that they may be interested in. And if you have any thoughts about this game, or difficult games in particular, or anything in this same genre, go ahead and leave it down in the comments below, and we'll carry on the conversation there. As always, we will see you guys next time, and until then, keep playing.